which is another Joe Lauria Consortium News. Our friends over at Consortium News, outstanding publication. Subscribe, support them, please. Joe Lauria is their managing editor. He wrote another banger. You know, we covered a Joe Lauria story last week where there was a speech that he had given about Julian in front of Justice Department. And this week, we've got Consortium News Indie Media Award honoree again. Talking about Albo. So their prime minister,
Right.
Albanese, he spoke with ABC, which is the Australian broadcasting company, while in London for the coronation, and they asked him about Assange. So that's pretty interesting. Love that guy. Joe Lauria is great. All right. And there he is meeting with Biden at the East Asia Summit. That was back in November. But Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he has unequivocally stated his position to the United States that a diplomatic resolution to the case of Julian Assange must be made. That's nice. In his clearest statement yet about the fate of the imprisoned WikiLeaks publisher, Albanese told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation in an interview in London that he's told the U.S. Justice Department that Assange's case must come to an end. And I agree. I continue to say in private what I said publicly as Labour leader and what I've said as Prime Minister, that enough is enough, Albanese told the ABC. This needs to be brought to a conclusion. It needs to be worked through. We're working through diplomatic channels. We're making very clear what our position is on Mr. Assange's case. But so far, the Justice Department, of course, has not yielded in its pursuit of Assange on espionage charges that could land him in U.S. prison for up to 175 years if he's extradited from Britain and convicted in the U.S. on all 17 or 18 charges that he's being charged with. So Albo says, I know it's frustrating. I share the frustration. I can't do more than make very clear what my position is, he said. And the U.S. administration is certainly very aware of what the Australian government's position is. That's nice to know. But asked whether he would raise the Assange issue directly with Joe Biden when the president visits Australia later this month, Albo said, quote, the way that diplomacy works is probably not the forecast discussions that you will have or have had with leaders of other nations. He appears to not have looked deeply into the facts on the case against Assange, surprise, surprise, when he asserted in the interview that he understood U.S. concerns that confidential information could lead to consequences for the people who were engaged in an activity. What? Assange's legal team laid out during extradition proceedings in London that he did not release unredacted versions of the U.S. diplomatic cables containing some of the names of U.S. informants until after two Guardian journalists provided the password to those files in a book that they wrote, and only after a German publication, Encryptome.com, published the unredacted files first. Additionally, upon cross-examination, of course, in the court-martial trial of former U.S. Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning for leaking the cables to Assange, U.S. General Robert Carr admitted there was no evidence that any informant had been harmed by the disclosures. What are we talking about here? Albanese cited Manning's case when discussing Assange's fate. I think that when Australians look at the circumstances, look at the fact that the person who released the information is walking freely now, having served some time in incarceration but is now released for a long period of time, then they'll see that there's a disconnect there. And that's what he said in his interview. But asked whether other leaders in the West were speaking out for the principles of free speech involved in Assange's case, Albanese, of course, told the ABC, we do value the freedom of expression, but we also have, in today's uncertain world, legitimate concerns about our national security. So he's already hedging about censorship. Quote, I'm not going to sit here as someone who chairs our National Security Committee and say it's fine if you publish all the details about our National Security Committee deliberations, because if you did that, Australian lives would be put in danger. There are real consequences for that. I'm a big supporter of freedom of the press, but with that also comes a responsibility to take into account the consequences of whether the information is not available to the public, what the consequences would be if we just had a free-for-all. Well, in the extensive interview, this is really interesting. Albanese said he was concerned for Assange's health. There was a court decision here in the UK that was then overturned on appeal that went to his health as well. And I'm concerned for him. Yeah, sure he is. I'm sure he's very concerned. Until now, he's kept largely quiet about his dealings with the US regarding Assange. That he spoke so openly about it in this interview is an indication not only of his frustration, but that he's decided going public could bring more public pressure on the US to act. It also shows that the public pressure Albanese has faced up to up the ante may also have had an effect. And that's what I got on Julian and Julian's case and World Press Freedom Day and the gaslighting that's been happening. And can't say enough, free Julian Assange. I really hope that the Australian government is working overtime, which I know they're not, but they should be, to secure his freedom, because he is an Australian citizen who did not commit a crime in the United States. He published some, he wasn't the one who committed the espionage at any time. He was the publisher, but it's Vault 7 that they really are going after him for, using the excuse of the Iraq war logs and Gitmo torture to do that. John Pilger is working overtime. Desert Mantis, and love to John Pilger. Love to all the journalists who are keeping this alive, like Joe Lauria, like Caitlin Johnstone. And, of course, big shout-out to our sister Misty Winston, who she does Action for Assange. She does...
We're fucked.
Yep. Yes, we are. She's organizing... I don't even know when the next one's going to be, probably over the summer. But she organizes protests and direct actions in support of raising awareness and getting more people to... Yeah. No, Caitlin Johnstone is evil. Oh, my God, Brad. Don't even get started. Don't get me started. Holy shit. Yeah, there were some, apparently Caitlin Johnstone derangement syndrome is real, and Brad found someone who suffers from it, and it was pretty damn sad to watch that meltdown happen. All it takes is for one bastard to drop the charges on Assange, and then he can go home. That's absolutely right. CJDS, well, there's nice. Already, yep. TJDS, there's all different kinds of derangement syndromes.
Yep.